And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our next panel and to introduce them. The title, of course, is The Heritage House. How has the definition evolved? And this is a topic that we need to keep revisiting because it is evolving all the time. And so, you know, it's a working document. And please know that we get that. Oh gosh, I think I may have done something here. Our speakers are Mark Emanuel, who's the co-owner of David Webb Jewelry, and Mark is an amazing human, an extremely knowledgeable person. Tom Heyman, president of Oscar Heyman. We're thrilled to have Oscar Heyman represented, and years of admiration for the house. Nicolas Lussinger, who is the CEO of Buccellati. What can one say? An iconic maison. And I first met him when he was working for Van Cleef and Arpels, and I got into the archives. That was even before anything else. So we go back a ways, and I'm very honored that he's here. And then Raj Mehta, who spoke on a panel yesterday, and Raj is representing the notion of heritage from an Indian perspective. One of the things we're very committed to, and when I say we, I mean Jean and I, because this is her show, is expanding the thinking about heritage from essentially a kind of American Eurocentric, well, it may be not even American, that's an expansion, but the Eurocentric notion, static notion of a maison. What is happening today? What does it mean today? Anyway, and our moderator is Jean Poe, and Jean is now Chief Business Officer and Head of Compliance at Clover 2 Corporation, and we had the privilege of having Lester Friedlander speak yesterday. Jean has been deeply involved in jewelry for generations, and she has both an amazing sense of design and risk-taking for quality on the one hand, but on the other hand, somehow figuring out innovative ways to bring that to a potential consumer. So, and she's also got a wonderful mind. So at any rate, I give you Jean Poe, and this is the panel, and we're excited.
Okay. So just to check to see that everyone's awake, I thought we would start with a little poll. So I'm going to go through the brands here, and I would like the audience just to scream out some things that come to mind with each brand. So let's start with David Webb. Zebra, signed. Longevity, big. Okay. Oscar Heyman. Gemstones. Luxury. Buccellati. Gold. Hammering. Texture. Italian.
Finesse.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So just to point out that, you know, it's not every brand that evokes such consensus and such strength of feeling and, you know, identity, right? So in an age where speed, scale, and innovation is dominating the luxury conversation, heritage houses still stand as living testaments to tradition, to craftsmanship, and enduring legacy and identity. But to endure is to change, because these brands have been around and evolving. So the question is no longer just what is a heritage house, but what must it become to stay relevant, desirable, and true to its roots? So I'd like to start off the conversation with, you know, just some thoughts from our panelists about what is a heritage house. I'm going to start with our resident jewelry historian, Mark. And if you could, you know, just say some words about what is a heritage house from your mind, and what, you know, what also drew you to David Webb when you acquired the company. Were you thinking about heritage at the time?
Not that much, but somebody spoke a phrase that stuck in my mind. Can you hear me now? Better, okay. When I first bought the company with my partners, somebody spoke a phrase which has stuck in my mind for a long time, and the phrase is a good one. I don't remember quite who spoke it, but they said, "The past is prologue." So, you know, when you're talking about heritage for any company, speaking generally, it's about studying the heritage, the DNA, the identity, the nuts and bolts of a company, how it started. The maestro, who in our case, Mr. David Webb himself, what his history was, where he came from, what was his design scope, what was his evolution as an artist. All these things were points of study for me. So heritage was a matter of a starting point, something to preserve and to iterate on.
And so, in a different vein, Tom, you know, you are in a long line of, you know, generational owners of Oscar Haim. And so, how do you think about heritage within the context of a privately owned family business and, you know, its identity and its continuity?
So, I guess let me know if you can't hear me. I think that heritage, it's almost like a fine restaurant in a way. If you're a 4-star Michelin restaurant or you are a 1-star Michelin restaurant, the difference is you can be a phenomenal restaurant and you can't start off getting 1 star, 4 stars. You start off getting 1 star. And if you have 1 star for 3, 4, 5, 10 years, you might get a second. And if you're around for long enough, consistently fine quality, you might eventually earn 4 stars or the nomenclature of a heritage house. So I think a heritage house almost by definition, has to have been around for a long time and relevant for a long time, true to its roots, so that if I pick up a piece of jewelry, we were just talking earlier, if I pick up a piece of jewelry that we made before my father was born, I probably can recognize it as ours, or most likely ours, or most likely not ours, because there's a foundation to the design and the quality and the identity of the piece that runs through things a heritage house has made through its whole history. Which is not to say that a heritage house is stuck in the past. It has to evolve. You're only talking about heritage houses that are relevant today. They're not relevant today. They're no longer a heritage house. They're a has-been. So I think there's an aspect of being a heritage house which speaks to quality over consistent quality over a long period of time, and consistency in what they design and produce, with the understanding that that changes over time, but you can still find the foundation in the new pieces.
Mm. And Nicola, you're at the helm of Buccellati, and previously you were at Van Cleef APAC. So how would Richemont define heritage house?
I think that Richemont defined heritage house by the design also. I think what they are interested in acquiring, a maison like they did for Buccellati not such a long time ago, and they did from Vernier, which is another maison which was just acquired by Richemont, is obviously the history, the traditions, but also that they have a strong design which is very recognizable. So if I look at, obviously Webb or Heyman, that's the same thing. If somebody wears a piece of David Webb, I will spot it right away. If somebody wears a piece of Buccellati, being 100 years old or 10 years old, you spot it right away. So that's what is important, because it's today, you have, if you go to fashion, you have like this big, sometimes flashy logo. In jewelry, you don't want logo, you want old refinement, but to a certain level, when you want people to recognize the piece of jewelry you are wearing, and that's what is important, and that's what, if you look at what Richemont is looking for, I think it's that.
Recognizable. And so Raj, it's fascinating, we were having a conversation, you brought up some amazing points about the cultural view that, we would see in India with respect to heritage. And can you just share a little bit about what the differences are?
So, in India, actually, you don't have really heritage houses. You have really kind of local jewelers. And most of the jewelers, they are, so if you cut India in 4 pieces, north, east, west, south, all the cultures in different areas and their tastes are different. So it's not the house or the jeweler which is only exceptional, it is to do with the type of jewelry. So if you take North India, which has a lot of legacy of Maharajas and the Mughals, a lot of jewelry will be designed in that context. And so, for example, there is Jarao jewelry, which has a lot of flat stones. And if you turn around the piece of jewelry, you have a lot of enamel designs, and it's like almost an art piece. So it's that piece which is more of a what was the word? The piece is the historical part, rather than the jeweler himself. And that entire piece can be made by different jewelers, and families in India usually have their own jewelers that they work with. So the case is about trusting a jeweler. So it's not about just innovation or design, it is the entire piece or entire jewelry section which is more of a legacy rather than the discussions that we're having here right now.
So you're saying that it's the heritage in the technique and in the, let's say, the aesthetic.
Yes, aesthetics are the heritage. It's not a particular jeweler or a particular house over there. Mm-hmm. It's that entire sector of jewelry. So for example, as I said, the Jarao jewelry, that is well known, and there is a heritage value from the Maharaja times.
And so does that mean that there's no changing in the technique over time? I mean, in terms of innovation?
No, there is change in techniques, there is change in the way they make it. Of course, in those days they were all handmade. Mm-hmm. Today there is technology used while making it, but the roots remain the same. The designs remain pretty much the same.
And so
it's a lot about craftsmanship on those pieces, for example. And if you go to South India, the jewelry looks completely different. It's totally different, and you can actually identify that this is South Indian jewelry and this is North Indian jewelry. South Indian jewelry will be a lot of temples, gods, so it will be a lot related to religious and different beliefs. So it's a completely different mindset. Yeah.
So let's talk about craftsmanship and the importance of craftsmanship for a heritage house. Mark, you have a workshop in-house. How important is that? And why is it important?
Well, I can tell you a story because we can talk about heritage all day long and techniques and all of the components of running a business and being aware of what you have and what your tasks are. But selling is really the essential. Unless you make sales, you really don't have a business. There was a Middle Eastern lady who had very tentatively visited our shop a number of times, made comments, loved the jewelry, but never pulled the trigger, never, offered her a credit card, although she showed a great deal of interest and enthusiasm for what we were offering. And one day, to sort of break the spell, I said, let me bring her upstairs to the workshop and give her a little tour, let her meet the 30-some-odd amazing master jewelers that we have working there, who come from 13 different countries. I didn't give her the tour. I let a salesperson give her the tour. But it was there when she exited the workshop, and her face was wet with tears. And she looked at me and she said, "Wow, this is such a spiritual place." And so she became one of our best customers, and it took the exposure to the workshop itself, the spirituality, whatever ineffables, whatever indescribables there are, they were her conversion to being a customer. So that's my story.
Got it.
Yeah.
Nicola, how do you tell that story at scale on a global level?
No, I mean, the craftsmanship it depends the different houses, because if you look today, obviously I spoke about the design, but yes, you have the craftsmanship to do this design. But if I look at Buccellati, I mean, the value of a piece of Buccellati jewelry is in the craftsmanship. So that's very important to us. It's a tradition which is passed also from generation to generation. So you speak about the founder, you speak about the family. And yes, Buccellati was acquired by Richemont, but we still are lucky to have 5 members of the Buccellati family working with us. And I tell you that because if you go to the workshop, we also have a tradition of jewelers. I mean, we have jewelers already. The father was working for Buccellati, and even sometimes the grandfather was working for Buccellati. So you have this tradition in the workshop as well. But then if you speak of the challenge, it's like when you develop a maison, when you develop a brand, you need more products. So you need absolutely to be legitimate, to respect the quality and the design which made the house famous. And it's not so easy to find these jewelers today. If I look at Buccellati, I mean, it's in Italy, but we work with a lot of jewelry schools to try to recruit new jewelers. But then when we hire new jewelers, even if it's already a seasoned jeweler, we need 6 months in-house to train him or her to the Buccellati techniques. It's not something, they cannot start to make jewelry right away, which is also a complication. And at Buccellati, we have jewelry and silver. Obviously, here we are more to speak about jewelry, but we're also very famous for the silver, for the homeware. And if I look at a jewelry and a jewelry workshop, I mean, today, when I visit and I look at the workshop, being at Van Cleef, being at Cartier, being at Buccellati, a lot of efforts have been made. So now it's like the space is incredible. They have an incredible workspace. They have like big windows. They are in Milan or they are outside Milan with a view on the countryside. They work. They are listening to music sometimes. They are doing pieces which are not always the same, so it's not a repetitive work. It's a beautiful job. So we try to promote it as much as possible, but it's something which is appealing. Even myself, when I see that, I could see myself being working in workshops. So we find kind of candidates. When I look at silver, and I tell you that it's less appealing because, I mean, if you go to a silver workshop, you still have a lot of hammer, you still have a lot of noise. They are working with soldering. They have, like, when you look at their hands, there is always 1 or 2 nails which are black because one time the hammer went on the finger. But, I mean, they also realize this Buccellati silver, and I don't know if you are familiar with it, but it's like animals, it's kind of a basket with fruits, and it's incredible. And when I look at them, They are all in their 50s, late 50s, 60s, so I'm also worried about that. We made a lot of efforts to promote the jewelry. I think now we need to work on silver as well, because it's techniques which will be lost. And if you look at Buccellati, and if I speak of Van Cleef & Arpels as well, there has been techniques which have been lost. So we have the pieces in our museum, and we are not able to do them anymore.
I will come back to the concept of resources, but I wanted to, Tom, so Heyman, as you said, focuses more on the stone and de-emphasizes the gold. So how does that conversation get translated when it comes to craftsmanship or, you know, the idea of design?
So I'm going to put a little different spin on that. Actually, we are really known as a platinum house. So we actually work with very little gold. And our founding goes back to two of my great uncles working for Fabergé in 1900, when the brand new technology in the jewelry industry was alloying platinum. So the trade didn't know how to work platinum until right about 1900, learning how to heat a flame hot enough to melt platinum. You couldn't work platinum before that. So we've always tried to use all the different technologies and that are appropriate, that are new, that are old. I think of it sometimes as, and craftsmanship is really core to who we are. And I'll get back to in a minute with the minimizing the metal, but I say sometimes if you want to draw a straight line, the perfect tool is a ruler, and if you want to draw a circle, it's a compass. So that doesn't mean a compass should replace a ruler, but there are certain times you use one and certain others. So there are times when we alloy metal and we roll it into a bar and we pull it into wire, and now we can make a prong. And there are times when we use 3D modeling and print a prototype and then make a casting. And so we're always looking for what's the best tool to use for that part of the making of something. Going back to Cartier, and then actually my great uncle was the first non-French craftsman in New York working for Pierre Cartier, 1907, 1908. Both of their design aesthetic, and this was part of the advent of using platinum, which was stronger than silver or white gold, was to have thin wire work. It was not until platinum really came into the jewelry industry that you had less apparent metal. You could use thin wires in a flexible necklace. And so our foundation was very much in the beginning of that period, and our design aesthetic is to have the absolute best gemstones we can find anywhere in the world, and then show them off with minimal embellishment sometimes. And we have fancy designs that have all sorts of metal, but for the most part, we like to minimize the metal so that as much of the gem can be shown as possible.
And how does that innovation translate to today?
It's very similar today. It's not to say that we don't use gold if we're setting a orange sapphire or something that is a warm colored stone, and we'll use yellow gold. But for the most part, we still de-emphasize the metal in it, more focused around the gemstone.
And, you know, for all of these brands, the design DNA is a very important aspect. So how do you think about keeping the brand relevant without, you know, losing that DNA? Anyone can start.
No, but you must make it evolve. So that's a challenge, in fact, to keep the design, the recognizability of the design, the recognizability of the technique to the 21st century by adapting yourself to the taste of the day, you know what I mean? And being still faithful to the quality and the design. That's a challenge, and there is not a recipe which is the same for everybody, but And as we say, you know, if it's a David Webb piece from the 60s, if it's a contemporary David Webb piece, I mean, right away somebody enters the room wearing them, you recognize them, which is the same with a lot of jewelers. You have other jewelers which are more complicated. I mean, I will not give names, but I mean, if you look at the big jewelers of the Place Vendôme, you have the one where you can really easily recognize the design. I mean, we spoke about Cartier, we spoke about Van Cleef. The others much less, you know, because they try to go to new techniques, they try to go to new materials, and perhaps also their history is not as rich as the Maison I mentioned are.
There's two.
In design, because I mean there is a lot of Maisons which are very rich in history, which have been there for many, many years, and if I mention the name to you, you all know them, but if I tell you what is a specific design of the Maison, you will not know.
I think there's a few things. There's a few things that that pull all of us in sort of a give and take dance with how we evolve. And one of the components is how we compete with our own excellence, how we maintain quality in this world where handcrafted work is maybe a walking dinosaur. And then the other pull is how we compete with the excellence of others. The competition amongst brands is, you know, ever present, but we can't really lose sight of, you know, our own design, our own DNA. And when we evolve, there's always a little bit of a danger of the tail wagging the dog, responding a little bit too much to market pressures, you know, what customers want. The brand really has to follow its principles, despite all of the wins and sort of the shifts in the economic environment. Of course, there's things like entry point collections, things that all of us need as a source of revenue for our brands. But it really all flows from the top down. The great pieces of jewelry that you make, the haute couture, so to speak, is where the inspiration comes from, where you exercise the full strength of your DNA. So yes, you know, we all change, and we all evolve, but it's important to keep in mind the preservation of heritage, of craftsmanship, things that make your brand loved and meaningful.
I think, sorry.
I was gonna say, I think it's actually a fine line that we have to all tread. If you're not making relevant jewelry, you don't keep making jewelry. I think the three of us are not looking to make fast fashion. I mean, it's too hard to make. It takes too much time. Oscar Heyman, we pay really intense attention to all the little fine details that go into making a gorgeous piece of jewelry. And then we want someone to treasure it for generations. We want to make something that the grandchildren's fight over to keep, not gets liquidated because they need a new car or whatever it is. At the same time, you know, for us, for David Webb, Buccellati, and I think you said well, you have to stick to your foundation to who you are, although at the same time it's more an evolution than a revolution. And over time, if it doesn't change, you don't keep making jewelry.
Raj, you were about to say something.
Yes, I think so. There's a lot of heritage that lies in your archives. And while you're actually developing your designs over the last 50 years, 100 years, you're not even actually knowing that you're building the heritage, but it's happening as that time goes by. And I think a lot of designs today are designs of the past that have come back and making feel the consumer that they are part of those early days. So I'm just, for example, the Alhambra or the Le Clou de Cartier, both designs which were, one was developed in the late 60s, the other one early 70s, which have become really hot products today on the market. At the consumer level, it makes the younger feel part of that generation. So there's a lot lying in the archives that I think the brands are pulling back nowadays to stay relevant. I mean, of course, brands they are so well positioned, but to keep their relevance stronger, I think so they're going back a lot to their archives also.
No, it's funny you say that because Buccellati, as Van Cleef, belongs to Richemont, and the chairman of Richemont, Mr. Rupert, mentioned often that in his speech that most of the business made at Richemont is made with products which were developed before Richemont purchased the brand. So.
If you've sort of dumbed down the product, you know, they can tell, does it still have the veritas of that house? Does it still have that design voice, or what Mark calls the DNA? And when we did the David Webb book, and really at that time, the archives was the Sleeping Beauty. And we had to wake up that beauty. Diane worked with us, Diane Batista in the room also. But we had to almost be forensic investigators to figure out what in the world was the voice and to go forward with that voice. And I think that the beauty of a heritage house is staying true to that voice, because change too much and you lose your audience.
Identity.
Your identity. That was all.
I hate to be gauche, but I love to stir the pot. So I'd like to go down the row and hear, what is your starting price point piece, and do you feel that it represents the brand DNA?
But I think that's a good question, and it's exactly what something I wanted to mention. Because if you look at the heritage maison and you look at their history, the last 20, 30 years, there's been a big shift, which goes to exactly what you say. Because Cartier, Van Cleef, Buccellati, David Webb to a certain point, I guess, I mean, they were done for a little elite of the society, which were buying them. Most of the jewelry at the time were not branded. So, like, it was a lot of jewelers in New York, in Europe, where you are buying, your bracelets, a gift for your fiancé, your wife, your mother, which were not branded. And then the high society, international jet set, was going through the world and buying Buccellati necklace in Rome and Cartier bracelet in New York. And at the time, there were very, very few stores. I mean, if you look at Van Cleef & Arpels, even Buccellati, I mean, now we have over 50 stores. Like you take like 20 years ago, there were perhaps 6, 7 stores of Buccellati worldwide. So obviously, you reach a different level of the population now, because, I mean, now the people only trust signed jewelry. So not only because of the quality, because of the history, because of the quality of the stone. I mean, before working at Van Cleef & Arpels and Buccellati, I worked at an auction house. And I mean, it's interesting that you are here from Oscar Heyman, because Oscar Heyman, as you say, worked a lot for Cartier, worked a lot for Van Cleef & Arpels. The quality of the pieces are incredible. But when I started in the auction world, an incredible Art Deco Oscar Heyman bracelet was selling for 100 at auction. The same bracelet, which was done for Cartier, but with a Cartier signature, was selling for 130. And today, an Oscar Heyman bracelet will sell for 100, and a Cartier will sell for 300. Because, I mean, all these maisons did so much advertising, that now people only want branded jewelers. I mean, Oscar Heman being a branded jeweler. So it's not even Oscar Heman, it's people don't touch it. And the quality is incredible because Oscar Heman, you manage to do jewelry under your name and also for other maisons. And there's a lot of workshop in the quality of Oscar Heman, but mostly French, which don't exist anymore. Because if you look at high jewelry, I mean, today not all the high jewelry is made on the Van Cleef workshop, in the Buccellati workshop, in the Cartier workshop. You have a lot of external workshops which are specialized for high jewelry. And at the time, it's a long tradition. So already in the 30s, you can see a piece which is done by a specific workshop in Paris for Cartier. And this piece today will sell for an astronomical price. And the same piece, no signature, but the hallmark from the same workshop, so the quality is here, sell for much, much, much less. So yes, so that's a big change. It's that today people want signed jewelry. So obviously for smaller piece as well. So when in a maison, the average price, I guess, like 50 years ago was like 100,000, now it's dropped to 5,000. Because they more, obviously you have the high jewelry collection. They are, as you say, go back to the tradition, they are sold right away. It's not that they are just done by the image, but you see these high jewelry pieces on models, in magazine, on a lavish presentation, which are done all over the world. But then it's also to make a younger customer being part of this dream, being part of the history by buying a more affordable piece.
I have a funny story about sort of the lowest price point collection that David Webb makes or indulges in. In the archive, there was a catalog of looks, of collections, you could say, that David Webb, between the 70s and the 80s, basically sent out to customers. And the spring 1971 page had this, to me, when I first bought the company, looking at it, had this incredible unisex collection, which was the nail collection. There was bangles, the rings, earrings, etc. There were even medieval nails, that were, they had the medieval shape and they were bent into bangles. But it was clearly unisex because some of them were wearable for men and certainly for women as well. And I said, wow, that's unusual. Let me cast a couple of these nail rings. So in 2010, we made our first nail ring, and we made a few and we sold them. And I said, that's really interesting. They're saleable. People like them. They were a little bit bigger and bulkier than the ones that we make now, but they were lovely. They had real quality and authenticity and strength. Strength for those women that wore them, and strength for the men as well. My next door neighbor, or in the floor below me in 608 Fifth Avenue, was Renato Ciapullo. And I think he still has his place there, his office there. And I always, ran into Renato in the elevator in 608 Fifth Avenue, which is where I also have a wholesale business. And I said, Renato, your brother, worked up at David Webb. I'd love to show you the place. He says, I know David Webb. I think I worked there for 6 months. I know Aldo, Aldo worked there for, 4 or 5 years. I said, well, come on up. I'd love to show you the workshop. And this must have been, I don't know, 2015, something like that. I was the workshop was in the middle of sort of making all kinds of nail things. Because by that time, The collection was more or less launched. Our very meager advertising didn't really do much for it, but every once in a while a client would come in, try it on, and buy something. And so Renato finally accepted the invitation. I was giving him a tour of the workshop, and we walked by the workbench of a jeweler who was in the middle of making a nail earring. All of a sudden, our conversation, our jibber-jabber between the two of us stopped cold. And I could see his face visibly blanching, you know, from like happy to sort of terrified. He said, "Mark, oh my God, you're making a nail earring?" He says, "I've got to run." Little did I know that he was in the middle of negotiating the sale of Aldo Cipulo's archive to Cartier. And of course, Juste un Clou came out of it, and it's extraordinary. It moved the needle for Cartier. And I wouldn't say it was a matter of bad timing for us, because we certainly don't have the marketing power of a big brand. But one part of your question was about the identity of the jewelry that you make that's, you know, a little bit more economic. And clearly, the nail ring is part of our identity. But it turned out in sort of a funny way, an ironic way, that it became the identity of Cartier more than ours. But it's still, you know, one of the most popular items, you know, that we make. It's still a very viable collection. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Quick question for Tom before we start to wrap up. So, Nikolai just shared a story about auction houses and, you know, how Heyman's pieces come up. So, in your view, are auction houses competition or supportive of your business?
Can I just say yes? They're both. 20, 25 years ago, and actually still today, if you put 20, 25 years ago, the auction houses really started identifying the brands behind the piece, which today they do for most pieces. In the back of the book, there's the list of the brands and a little write-up about them. If you pick up an auction house and you look at all the brands, there's Cartier, there's Van Cleef & Arpels, there's Buccellati, there's Webb, and there's Oscar Heyman, there's J.E. Caldwell, there's Marcus & Company, there's E.M. Walt, Black Star and Frost Gorham, all these old names. Other than us, all of them are retailers. And we're really almost the only non-retailer, we sell through retailers, who's identified. And the auction houses for us was a help in expanding our marketing, if you will, to the greater jewelry buying consumers. And we felt that, you know, we're not an unknown brand, you know, to the connoisseur of jewelry, the collector of jewelry who has jewelry. If you ask average person on the street, have you ever heard of Cartier? They're going to say yes. Have you ever heard of Oscar Heyman? They're going to say no. David Webb is probably somewhere in the middle. And so in that sense, auction houses have been kind of important for us. You know, a little story I'll tell. There was a invisible ruby diamond flower brooch that, sorry, I'm getting a phone call in my ears, but invisible ruby and diamond flower brooch that we had made in the 1950s for Van Cleef & Arpels, engraved VCA-NY with a 5-digit number. And that's how what we made for them was engraved. The only invisible made for them engraved NY would be from us. The rest was from Paris. And so I found our original records, our original black and white photograph, our design, etc. And I leveraged that to get an order from a store that had a customer who collected these to reproduce the exact same brooch. I didn't get the Van Cleef price that went in auction, but I made, you know, a regular sale. And so sometimes it helps us. But we think of the auctions today as another retailer. They almost make a retail markup between what they get from the buyer and the seller. And they're probably one of the best retailers out there.
Interesting. Okay, quickly before we go to questions, we'll go down the line. And Raj, you can answer this in the context of Watch and Jewelry 2030. If I could have one little sentence from each of you about your hopes and visions for your heritage house, or, you know, in your case, heritage houses in general, for the next 50 years.
The hope, I mean, obviously, is to be faithful to the vision of Mario Buccellati, who created the Maison. In everything we will be done. To develop it to a certain level, because if I look at Buccellati, I don't think it wants to be developed like a Cartier or like Van Cleef & Arpels. I think what makes the success of Buccellati today is the niche concept of Buccellati, that when you buy a piece of Buccellati, not everybody will have it, so it's not like just a clue that you see on every wrist. Yes.
Thank you.
Next 50 years. An auctioneer from one of the big auction houses said to me a couple of years ago, thank God for Oscar Heyman, because 50 years from now, we need fine jewelry that is sought after to come into the auction. We need people today that are making fabulous, phenomenal jewelry that is going to have appeal 50 years from now. So my wish is that 50 years from now, I'm still making the new jewelry that 100 years from now, the auction houses are going to pine over who can get it to put it into the next one.
Yeah. Nicely said.
Thank you.
Keep the soul. Keep the soul alive in beautiful jewelry, because we're emerging into an era where verisimilitude is easily acquired, and we can't really predict what will happen in the next year, let alone 5 or 50 years. One of the keys to authenticity for all beautiful pieces of art, jewelry, paintings, otherwise, is that they give us strength. They make us respond to the spirituality of the piece. So my dying wish, because I'll be dead in 50 years for sure, is that the soul remains alive.
Beautiful, thank you. Raj?
I think so. From the point of view of brands, I think so. Sustainability is becoming a very important part nowadays, and as you said, from the point of view of WJI 2030, the initiative on which I'm a board member, we work a lot, very closely with the watch and the jewelers, and one of the most of the discussions everything is around the sustainability part, and it has a lot to do with the material sourcing, traceability, inclusiveness, and circularity, and all the different topics that will be for the future of the brands. And I think so these will become very core values for the brands and for the future. And I think so, especially the large brands, they are quite ahead in that. But there's a lot that will change as time goes by, because if we see 10 years back and today and what comes tomorrow, there's going to be constant changes coming in and constant demand from governments and everywhere. So I think so these these points will become more and more important into the businesses. And yeah.
Thank you. So it sounds like the key to the business of heritage is to stay true to the art of heritage. Questions for our panelists?
Try us again, try us again.
That's my question. My question is, what are you doing about the next generation? What is happening with the next generation of goldsmith and jewelers? As you're talking about sales, without craftsmanship or without the passion, there's no sales. The consumer is there, they're waiting for something beautiful and something that's heritage, but what are you doing to sustain this knowledge of like the industry? Sorry, thank you very much, and I think you're all very brave to sit on that panel. So thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you very much for a wonderful event. Thank you.
It's what I said. I will repeat myself, but I mean, we need to find the jewelers of tomorrow, and it's not easy. So what do we do? It's like you go to jewelry schools, you present the maison. You present the craftsmanship, you present what we need, you interview a lot of young people. Van Cleef & Arpels, they have a program which is called de mains en main, which means from hands to hands. So they go to schools even before they go to school, where people are like between 14. No, not even to trade school, to regular schools. And then they bring a whole thing. They have like lecture on jewelry. They bring a craftsman from Paris. They bring a whole workshop to attract the young people and to make them want to do this job. So obviously what you need to do is to popularize the job. And as I said, I repeat, it's a beautiful job because the conditions today of this kind of works are exceptional. And also, I mean, the conditions are very good because, I mean, the success today in luxury, and the luxury is a little bit on a crisis if you read in the newspaper and in the news, but not jewelry. Jewelry is not in crisis. So obviously, you have a competition between different maisons, different workshops, different brands. And if you are very good and talented jewelers, you have a lot of different offers, and different maisons and workshops will fight to have you. So yes, so I think it's if today there is one job which will be in demand in the next years and in the next 50 years, to answer your question, it will be this one.
I think it's a key question, actually. There's I mean, what I think of as a crisis in finding very skilled craftsmen in New York. And I can't really speak to in Italy or in Bangkok or in other parts of the world where there is also a lot of jewelry being made. We love when we can hire someone who's 25, and we've got a couple of people actually who are under 25, have gone through school, have a little bit of knowledge, which we like to say they have good hands. We can find someone that has good hands and the attitude and the aptitude to be a craftsman, which is not for everybody. You know, we will train them, we'll sit them next to a master jeweler or a setter, and we will work on them to develop those skills. It's from our seat, and we have a small shop, about the same size as David Webb. It's one at a time. We're not a school, we're not training mass people, but it's a great trade. It's a great skill. You need artisans. It's a skill that you can be proud of, and it's an issue in this country finding those people.
This is the sad truth. So, I mean, not that I'm dropping a bomb, but you know, one of the issues of making jewelry in New York is that it's an expensive place to live, whether you're living in Queens, New Jersey, Manhattan itself. And great jewelers who work for New York houses probably max out These are guys, women, and men with the skill set of surgeons and with the same amount of intelligence
And integrity.
and integrity that max out at 100,000 a year if they're like super, super, super good. And that's not enough to sustain a family, and that's not enough to call it a great career anymore. The big house is, right, the big house is like, you know, Bulgari and others can set up a factory in Valencia, Italy, with place for 1,000 jewelers, import workers from Romania and the rest of Eastern Europe, and pay 13 euros an hour. Now, it helps to make jewelry that cheap. I'm not denigrating the skill set of these imported workers, but it helps. The economics is sort of there. It's in place. But the challenge that Tom and I have in creating great workshops is this problem of salaries. Because $50 an hour is poverty. And that's what most great jewelers command. I hope I haven't spoken
No,
incorrectly.
It's a challenge, you
Yeah.
know. It's a challenge to find really good craftsmen.
Yeah, thinking about craftsmanship and mastery as a resource that we don't talk about.
Part of what, you know, this is the 15th-year conference, and that is my point, that we are trying to get at that craftsmanship technique. There are things that are ephemeral, that die in culture. We don't see them as resources in the same way that we do things that are environmental, for example, perhaps because they're not monetized in the same way, I'm not sure. But this is something that we are, in my view, behind in. It is something that we should definitely, in terms of sustainability and responsible practice. The thing is that for it to be sustainable, have to be sustained. And so part of sustaining living will liability, and part of that is what we are. So I see, I mean, one of the things is that this is really for, I love really wonderful conversations about training culture, which is something that I would love to revisit. The different approaches that, you know, we are looking at here, the result, of course, what is happening in other parts of the world. But I think, you know, when we talk about resources, this is critical. One, without it, what makes, you know, what is creates humanity, and this is part of it. And one of the things related to that, to craftsmanship, that I'd like to sort of throw out, because I'm very tactile person when it comes to pieces, and not only, if you will, look, but often affect the way balance and integral part of what is DNA, totality of the piece. And that's something where, you know, I see not amongst those represented here in other comparable fields.
I live outside of Lexington, in a village called Mason. Lexington was built, Tiffany's has built a facility outside of Lexington. They're utilizing a lot of young jewelers from the area. A lot of them graduate from Coach and other training and beginning schools. And is it possible, I know your shop is small, so it may not be relevant, but is it possible to think of where we place within the United States a training center or a learning place for some of these young jewelers to venture into David said, Oscar Handmade? Is
We have an internship program. We have 3 interns sitting at benches. We just. Yeah, that is a problem. Who knows what type of sacrifices people have to go through. But there is, for somebody who's really good and can advance within our system, look, I painted a bleak picture, but in essence, if you become a master jeweler, it is a rewarding life, and you can figure it out.
Sir, I see your question, and I'm getting signal to wrap up. So, do we have time for one more or no? One more question.
All right, so Everett actually asked the question I was going to ask, but I have another one. So about 15 years ago, I was running manufacturing for David Yurman, then I went to work for Scott Kay. We had those same issues with the workforce, but what was on my mind at that time was what happens after David? What happens after Scott? And sure enough, when I was at Scott Kay, he actually passed away. And I think, no degradation to who took it over, it's not the same. And so there was not a carryover of these great Scott Kay designs. How do you view that sustainability at the top end? In other words, when the people who are up at the top creating and designing, do you have a kind of a succession plan in place or something where, when those people start to age out, your top people, that this can be carried on and really keep the same DNA of the designs? Because designers they're all different.
The big houses have had this simple solution of hiring, outside artists, outside creative directors to reinvigorate the brand. The Aldo Cipulos, the Elsa Paredes, the Donald Claflins, all of these have been essentially ingredients to the growth and sustainability of these brands. I will mention Elsa Paredes and Angela Cummings and Paloma Picasso, where Tiffany is concerned. There is a way to renew talent, but without talent, you have no heritage. Sorry, heritage is meaningless without talent to carry it forward. So your question is a good one.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you for your time and for everything that you contribute to our industry.
Thank you.